We can say we've got a pretty full house here today, which is great. We can say welcome back to David Marks. We've missed you, David. I hope you've been keeping up, because you've been mentioned in dispatches more than once over the time that you were away. I hope you had a good trip in Cape Town.
Fantastic, thank you.
Good to see you back. And welcome back to Jeffrey as well. We missed him too. And welcome to Barry, a newcomer. Welcome to Barry. I had the pleasure of having Shabbat meal with Barry a few weeks ago. It was a real pleasure. And it's nice that he's joined us. And Avril's joined us back as well. Avril Links, thank you for joining us all the way from Ramat Bet Shemesh. Is that where you are? No, you're not.
Netanya.
Oh, you're in Netanya. Didn't you used to be in Ramat Bet Shemesh?
I go backwards and
go back and forth. Okay, yeah. Jolly good. Right. Now, for those of you who have not been before or who have forgotten where we're up to, we are learning Gemarah Sanhedrin. We are on page 12a, Yud Bet Amud Aleph. We use the Steinsaltz Gemarah as our basic text because it's nicely set out with all the vowels, etc., and some notes. So I'm going to put that on the screen in a minute. Just for Barry's sake, we don't go very fast, Barry. We started this in November 19, and in almost 2.5 years, we've done 11 pages. So it's not a fast pace, but we try and do things thoroughly. So the subject that we're talking about.
Can you dedicate this Shia, Johnny? To
oh yes, yes. Thank you for reminding me. There are 2 dedications for the Shia actually. One is for the Yortzeit of Johnny's late mother, Rivka Bat Shimon. We wish Johnny a Chaim Arukim and Le'ilui Nishmat Rivka Bat Shimon, and also Jeffrey and my mutual great grandfather has a Yortzeit today, Asher Tzvi ben Shabtai Chaim. It's his Yortzeit today. The name Asher has gone through the generations. It was Asher was my our great grandfather. Asher was my father, and Asher is my grandson. So we have got, how many generations is that? Great grandfather, grandfather, father, me, son, grandson. 6 generations we span there with the name Asher. So I hope that Asher Tzvi ben Shabtai Chaim, his neshama, will also have an aliyah from this learning. Thanks for that reminder, Johnny. Right, so the subject that we're talking about is the intercalation of the year, meaning the extra month, the Adar Bet, the Adar Sheni, which is inserted in a leap year. We spent a long time going through the reasons why a leap year is proclaimed, the various different reasons that can be. The main one being that Pesach has to be in the spring because it says so in the Torah, B'chodesh Ha'aviv, the month of the spring. And having gone through the why we intercalate, and also we went through the how we intercalate. It has to be done by the Nasi, by the president of the Sanhedrin, the head of the Sanhedrin, and it has to be declared by the Nasi, and then it has to be disseminated throughout the Jewish world. We're now dealing with the when. Before David Marks went away, we did start on the when, because we had the scenario of when it was going to be declared a leap year late. In other words, after Purim of what turned out to be the first Adar. When they did Purim on that year, they thought there was only one Adar. After Purim, they decided that they needed another Adar, and then we spoke about the fact that it could be as late as the end of Adar, or end of the first Adar, when they decided to intercalate and make a second Adar. That was unusual, but it did happen. The ideal time to make the intercalation, to announce the intercalation, appears to have been at the beginning of Adar. And it makes sense because we want it to be before preparations are made for Purim. And we want it to be after the winter so that we know what state the agriculture is in. Because we know, don't we, that the main reason for intercalating is agricultural, to keep Pesach in the spring, to make sure that the barley is ripe enough for the Omer offering, which takes place on the second day of Pesach. This is all stuff that we've learned. And so the ideal time to announce the intercalation is at the end of Tevet, at the beginning of Adar, and no, at the end of Shvat, I should say, beginning of Adar, and that will be the ideal time. As I said, there are times when it's done later, but the bit of Gemarah that we've been doing for the last couple of weeks is, I'll just go back, I'll put it on the screen in a sec, I'll just go back a few lines from where we're up to, just to get some continuity. I'm going to share the screen, should have the screen shortly. Yeah, you should have that now, yeah. Okay, so this is what we said a few weeks ago. Tanu Rabbanan, the sages taught, they don't make the announcement, or they don't do the intercalation, whatever that means, we'll come to that a bit in a minute, before Rosh Hashanah. The earliest possible time is Rosh Hashanah. We said already the latest possible time is the end of Adar, but you don't do it before Rosh Hashanah. The im ibruha, and if you did intercalate before Rosh Hashanah, eina me'uberet, it doesn't count. It's not counted. It doesn't count as a leap year. Aval mipnei hadachak, in an emergency situation, ma'abrin ota acha Rosh Hashanah miyad. You can do the intercalation immediately after Rosh Hashanah in extenuating circumstances. And even so, even if you announce that there's going to be a leap year, let's say immediately after Rosh Hashanah, so you could add in a month immediately, you could have another Cheshvan, you could have Cheshvan Aleph or Cheshvan Bet, you could have Tevet Aleph, Tevet Bet, or you don't. Even if you make the decision to intercalate before Adar, Ein ma'abrin ela Adar. Makes no difference. When you announce it, the extra month is always Adar. That is what the Gemarah taught us in a Breita. We then went on to say, hang on a minute, is that the case? Ini, is that the case? I'm going to tell you a story now, says the Gemarah, that proves that actually there were times when the year was intercalated before Rosh Hashanah, in contradiction to the Breita we've just learned. And what was the story? This was a story of a code that was sent at the time of the Romans in order to inform the people that the year was going to be intercalated. Remember, at the time of the Romans, teaching of Torah was forbidden, and it was difficult for the rabbis of the Sanhedrin to get the message out that they were intercalating the year. It had to be done in a surreptitious manner. So the story that we told is the following. Zug v'hashalchu leila Rava. They sent a message to Rava over in the diaspora. Zug ba me Rakat. A pair came from a place called Rakat. Utfaso nesher, and a nesher, which we will call an eagle for the time being. An eagle captured this pair. Uviyadam, and in their hand, dvarim anaseh beluz. There was something that was made in a place called Luz. Now, in brackets, it explains to you what this thing was that they made in Luz. This wasn't part of the code, otherwise it'd be giving it away what the code was. Umay nihu, and what was this? Tchelet. It was tchelet. That's the end of the close of the brackets there. Bizchut harachamim ubizchutam yatzu b'shalom. And in the merit of the divine mercy and in the merit of these things, they went out in peace and they didn't get executed by the eagle. Now, we said in the last couple of weeks, we decoded this message to mean Zug, there was a pair of Rabbanim, Ba me Rakat, they came from Rakat. Rakat was the old name for Tiberias, where the Sanhedrin was gathered at the time. So a pair of Talmidei Chachamim came from the Sanhedrin, Utfason Nesher, and an eagle captured them. And the eagle was this fellow here, the Roman guy, the Roman soldier. There's his eagle on his standard. And that's why it was an eagle. It was a Roman soldier. We had some discussion last week about whether it was a Roman soldier or a Babylonian soldier. Rashi said it was a Babylonian soldier, but we felt that it was more likely to be Roman for the reasons that we've said. And the thing that they had in their hand was tchelet. This tchelet, and we spent some time last week going through what tchelet is, apart from the organization which I lead. And then they got away. And that was what we've done so far. And then we went on to this. We did the first part of this. The descendants of Nachshon. And we spoke about who Nachshon was. Anybody remember who Nachshon was? Who was Nachshon? We spoke about him.
Ben Aminadab.
That's right, Johnny. Nachshon ben Aminadab, the prince of the tribe of Yehuda, whose most famous action was to jump into the Red Sea up to his neck or up to his nostrils before the Red Sea split, indicating a man who takes the initiative, who doesn't wait for things to happen. He's a man who gets on and does things. So these people were descendants of Nachshon in two ways. They were descendants of Nachshon in a spiritual sense. In other words, these were people who were doers. They were willing to get up and go and do this job that needed to be done. But they were also physical, as it were, heirs of Nachshon, because Nachshon was the prince of Yehuda, and the prince of the Sanhedrin had to be from the tribe of Yehuda. So it is a allusion to the Nasi of the Sanhedrin. Bikshu likboa netziv echad. They sought to fix a pillar, one pillar. Netziv is a pillar. I think we talked about the word likboa, didn't we? That's the word that you use when you fix your mezuzah. Asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu likboa mezuzah, when you put up a mezuzah. We're going to go into why a netziv, which means a pillar, refers to the intercalated month. We're going to go into that very shortly. But for the moment, we just accept it, that these descendants of Nachshon, in other words, the Sanhedrin, the shluchim, the messengers of the head of the Sanhedrin, wanted to fix an extra month, i.e., they wanted to intercalate the year. V'lo hinichan adomi halaz. And the Edomite did not allow it. And we talked again last week in some detail about the fact that Edom, who was Esav, another name for Esav, the brother of Yaakov, how the name of Edom came to be synonymous with Rome. Not because Rome is genetically connected to Esav, which it isn't, but because Rome was the archetypal anti-Semite of the day, and Esav is the archetypal anti-Semite. Halacha hi Esav soneh et Yaakov. The Gemara tells us that it is a fact of life that Esav hates Yaakov. So anybody who is a rabid anti-Semite is connected with Esav or Edom. The Roman Empire became synonymous with Edom. So here, when it refers to an Edomi, it does not refer to a genetic descendant of Esav or Amalek, which is, of course, apt for this time of year, but it refers to Rome, which is why we thought that the soldier, this Nesher soldier, was probably a Roman soldier, not a Babylonian soldier or Persian soldier, as Rashi states. The Radak is the one who says that it was he was a Roman soldier. By the way, David Marks, just for your information, last week Julia asked me who the Radak was, and I went through who the Radak was, and I also said that he was your favorite Mefarash. So you got a mention in that regard as well. So this is where we got to. What we've said so far is revision for those who are there, and that's context for where we've got to now. So the Roman would not let these people go and do a intercalation. So what happened? Aval ba'alei asufot ne'esfu. The members of the assembly, ba'alei asufot, literally the owners of gatherings, i.e. the members of the assembly. What assembly are we talking about? We're talking about the Sanhedrin, the main body of deciding halakha. Ne'esfu, they gathered together, v'kavulo netziv echad, and they fixed for themselves netziv echad, one pillar, in brackets, an extra month. When the next paragraph will tell us why netziv is a month. But when did they do that? We're now coming, the last 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 words is the punchline of this whole piece of Gemarah. They did it beyerach shemet bo Aharon hakohen. Bayerach. What's a yerach? Anybody know what a yerach is? Avril Links, I thought I saw your lips move there.
I thought it was moon, but I might be wrong.
It is the moon, correct.
Yareach.
Yareach is the moon. So if that is the Yareach is the moon, what do you think Yerach might be? What constitutes a whole cycle of the moon?
Yeah.
A month. Yerach is another word for month. The month, the normal word we use for month in Hebrew is chodesh. Why do we use? Why is chodesh the word for month? What's it connected to?
New.
Chadash, new. Correct. Because every month the moon renews itself. So the word chodesh, month, is connected to chadash, new. But there is another word in Hebrew for month, and that is yerach, which Avril correctly said it comes from the word yareach, which is a moon. So in the month, shemet bo, in which somebody died. Who died? Aharon hakohen. The yerach shemet bo Aharon hakohen. They fixed this extra month in the month that Aaron HaKohen died in. Now this is all code, of course. They sent this code to Rava. The code was, let's just read the code. In code, a pear came from Rekat. It was grasped by an eagle. It had in its hand something that was made in Luz. It got away, and the descendants of Nachshon sought to fix a pillar, but the Edomite would not allow it. But the masters of gathering fixed for themselves a pillar in the month that Aaron HaKohen died. Now, if you just got that message and you were a Roman, you wouldn't have a clue what was going on. But because you know the Gemarah, because we've gone through the code, we know that actually what the message said was a pair of messengers came from the Sanhedrin, and although it was captured on the way, it got out. They got out, and the message was that they've had a meeting of the Sanhedrin, and they have fixed a intercalated year, and that took place in the month in which Aharon HaKohen died. Who knows which month Aaron HaKohen died in? before David Marks tells us. Anybody else know in which month Aharon HaKohen died? When is Aharon HaKohen's Yortzeit? Okay, let me ask you a different question. Who knows when Moshe Rabbeinu's Yortzeit is? Johnny?
Is it Av? No.
Is what Av?
When he died. His
Who?
Yortzeit.
Moshe or
Moshe.
Aaron?
Moshe.
No.
No. Aaron then.
Coming back to him. Moshe's Yortzeit. When's Moshe's Yortzeit? Well, if you come to shul tomorrow, you will find out, because tomorrow, Zayin Adar, is Moshe Rabbeinu's Yortzeit. Tonight and tomorrow is Moshe Rabbeinu's Yortzeit. Why will you find out tomorrow that it's his Yortzeit? Because even in the young Israel of Ramat Poleg, where we always say Tachanun in the mornings, unless there's a jolly good excuse, not like Machziki Adas in Manchester, where they never say Tachanun because there's always some Rebbe's Yortzeit. The only Yortzeit which we don't say Tachanun on in the whole year is Moshe Rabbeinu's Yortzeit. So there will be no Tachanun tomorrow. Hooray! And it's a Thursday. So you can stay, you can organize your meeting after shul 3 minutes earlier tomorrow, because we will finish 3 minutes earlier, because there is no long Tachanun tomorrow, because Moshe Rabbeinu's Yortzeit. I remember, just as an aside, those of you who are from Manchester will remember the late, great Rabbi Moshe Kupitz, a great man from an American extraction originally, who had lived in Manchester for many, many years, used to give brilliant shiurim. And he once said to me, with his inimitable huge smile, he says, how do you explain to a goy the pleasure that you get on a Thursday morning when there's a mile in shul? Because you don't say long Tachanun. He says, you just cannot explain that. It's just one of those things that you just cannot explain. Always made me smile, that. Anyway, there will be no Tachanun tomorrow morning because Moshe Rabbeinu's Yortzeit. So, Johnny Halpern, yes, David.
Yeah, it recalls the NEX Londoners will remember Diane Fisher, Oliver Sholem, and Diane Fisher once came to our shul on Zayin Adar when it was our minhag not to say Tachanun. He turned around and said minhag shtus.
Yeah. Okay. Well, minhag shtus, for those that don't know, means that's a stupid minhag. I don't agree with the late Dan Fisher's.
And neither do I.
I think it's a great minhag. And I think
there was a guy in our shul, an old chassid, who had a diary of all Rebbe's Yortzeits, which meant that, added to the fact that there was a mile in shul on a regular basis, we hardly ever said Tachanun on a Monday or Thursday.
Yeah, well, that's how it worked in Machziki Adas in Manchester as well. So back to our question from the Gemarah. Johnny Halpern has got the answer now. When did Aharon HaKohen die, Johnny? Av, correct. All right, so it was the month of Av. Now, how did you know that, apart from the fact that you guessed wrongly that it was Moshe's Yortzeit?
No, that's how I guessed it.
Okay, so anybody know what date in Av he died? David, tell us, please.
I would say Tisha B'Av.
No, it would be a good guess, Johnny. It would be a good guess. It wasn't David is right. It was Rosh Chodesh Av, the beginning of the 9 days. Now, how do we know that? I'm going to show you the Leon. If you could very quickly find for us Parashat
Masei.
No, we're going to Chukat first, David. You know me, I like to take you a roundabout way to get there. Parashat Chukat, Bamidbar chapter 20, please.
Yes, I've got it.
Okay, Bamidbar chapter 20. And if you would like to read verse, where are we now? There we go, verse 22 onwards.
They journeyed from Kadesh, and the children of Israel arrived, the entire assembly, at Mount Hor. Hashem said to Moses and Aaron at Mount Hor, by the border of the land of Edom, saying, Aaron shall be gathered to his people, for he shall not enter the land that I have given to the children of Israel, because you defied my word at the waters of strife. Take Aaron and Eleazar, his son, and bring them up to Mount Hor. Strip Aaron of his vestments and dress Eleazar, his son, in them. Aaron shall be gathered in and die there. Moses did as Hashem commanded, and they ascended Mount Hor before the eyes of the entire assembly. Moses stripped Aaron's garments from him and dressed Eleazar, his son, in them. Then Aaron died there on Mount Hor, and Moses and Eleazar descended from the mountain.
Okay, where does it say in that beautiful and dramatic description of Aaron's death, where does it say that he died on Rosh Chodesh Av? Correct, it doesn't. So how do we know that? We know it because there is another description, but a very passing description of Aaron's death, in which the Torah slips it in almost without us noticing. You'd have expected it to be over there because that was the main description of Aaron's death. If you, Leon, turn to chapter 33 in Bamidbar, which is where David wanted to take me straight away, you will see that we are at the beginning of the Parsha of Mas'eh, and it begins with Eila Mas'eh B'nai Yisrael. These are the journeys of the children of Israel. And we go through all these journeys. They went from this place to that place, to the other place, to this place. They went from there to there, from there to there, from there to there, until we get, I think there are 40 different journeys that we have, until we get to verse 37.
They journeyed from Kadesh and encamped in Mount Hor at the edge of the land of Edom. Then Aaron the Cohen went up to Mount Hor at the word of Hashem and died there in the 40th year after the children of Israel went forth from the land of Egypt, in the 5th month, on the 1st of the month. Aaron was 123 years old at his death on Mount Hor.
Okay, stop there. That's where we find out where Aaron died. We then go on from a whole bunch more journeys, and it's a very strange thing, this. If you actually look at the beginning of Parashat Maseh, have I shared the screen with you? No, I didn't. Sorry. Let me do that. Should have done that before. There you go. You should be able to see the screen now. So let me just show you. You don't need to read it, but you can see here, this is the beginning of the chapter. These are the journeys. And then you can see from verse 10, they journeyed from here, they journeyed from here, all those verses. Can you see that? They journeyed from. And then you get to verse 37, 38 and 39, which is what Leon's just read out. And then we go back to this business. They journeyed from here, they journeyed from here, they journeyed from there. And it's very strange that in the middle of all this, in mittendrinnen, as they would say in my neck of the woods, you've got the death of Aaron on Rosh Chodesh Av. A very strange thing. Any suggestions as to why the death of Aaron punctuates these journeys of the Bnei Yisrael in such a weird way, when the original description of his death, which is poetic and dramatic, doesn't give us the date there? Any suggestions? David, any suggestions?
It doesn't explain your question, but the remez is the fact that Parashat Maseh is always read in the week of the 1st of Av.
Okay, I didn't know that. That's interesting. Maybe that does answer the question. maybe the calendar was such that this is the right place to put it. I don't know, but it's an interesting information I didn't know. I looked around because it seemed to me a bit of a strange thing, and I wondered. This is only my own idea. It's not anything that I've read anywhere else. I just wondered whether the fact that Aaron had died here in the middle of these journeys is a turning point. And the turning point is that it's.
Could he have not died when they were actually there? Could that not be the right diary for it?
Say that again, Johnny.
Could he have not actually died in this story? They went to the edge of Edom and then went up the mountain and he died.
Yeah, I mean, it is. That's a description of, it is a description, but we don't have a description in this journeys. We don't have a description of Miriam's death or anybody else's. Only Aaron's death is here.
And it was an important occasion, wasn't it?
Yes.
It was one that needed, it was significant. And maybe that's why it was there. Can I also say that actually I live in a street called Kadesh, and I wondered always where that came from.
Okay, so Kadesh, the original Kadesh, was in the Sinai desert. Does anybody know? Yes, Jeffrey. I think Jeffrey was going to answer my question that I haven't yet asked. Go on, see if you could read my mind, Jeffrey.
Kadesh Barnea.
Kadesh Barnea. Okay, you didn't read my mind. Kadesh Barnea is the name of a place. Marcel's just
no, but Sharon thought that the reason that we hear about Aharon and not Miriam is it was important for the succession line to be established. And I think that in the story you read of the death of Aaron and the transference of the garments and vestments, that it was very important that that take hold and it not seem just like a permanent nepotism, but actually something for the ages. And only Aaron had his descendants serve in a position that went on through the next forever.
That's really interesting, Sharon. Let me just get my head around that a second. Let me just put that on one side and just finish what I was saying about Kadesh. Kadesh, since Julia mentioned it, is a place in the Sinai desert. The question that I thought Jeffrey was going to answer is where in modern Israeli history do we see that word Kadesh, that name Kadesh, in modern Israeli history?
Kadesh Barnea.
Yeah, we've had Kadesh Barnea. Yeah, I'm talking about in modern Israeli history. The word Kadesh is very famous.
6-Day War?
It's a bit, no, you're a bit before that, Michael. You're on the right track. I was just about to say it's before I was born. The Sinai campaign of 1956 was known in Israel as Mivtza Kadesh. Mivtza Kadesh. Look it up on Google if you like later on. Mivtza Kadesh, the Sinai War of 1956, where the French and British and Egyptians got involved with one another, and the Israelis, of course. It's called Mivtza Kadesh in Israel, and it's called Mivtza Kadesh because Kadesh was a place in the Sinai desert. Now, let's go back to what Sharon just said, because I think this is a very nice thought. So we know from the previous bit that Leon read over here that there was a dynasty established here. Elazar was given the job. It was given the garments of his father, and he took over the process of being the Kohen Gadol. And I think that what Sharon is saying, I think it's a very, very nice thought. It's a better thought than I had. I'll tell you what mine was in a minute, but I like this better. So here we're in the middle of this journeying. Well, we're not actually in the middle of the journeying. We're at the end of the journeying, aren't we? We're on the first day of the 5th month of the 40th year. We're almost at the end of the story here. And Aaron dies. And it could be, couldn't it, that everything just fell apart. Aaron's is dying here. This is Moshe is about to give his last speech, and he's about to die. And what I think Sharon is alluding to is that by putting this story in here, it's indicating that it's not the end of the road. It doesn't. No, I'm about to say it doesn't matter that Aaron died. I don't mean that. I mean it doesn't mark the end of the world. The world continues. Aaron's son continues in his footsteps. We are all mortal. None of us are indispensable. And even Aaron HaKohen was able to be gathered unto his people, and his legacy was able to live on. Sharon is correct that he was the only one of the three main leaders of Israel, Miriam, Aaron, and Moshe, whose son took over from him. Moshe's children, as we've said on a number of occasions, did not make the grade and did not follow in his footsteps. So it makes good sense to me. Sharon, with your permission, this is going to go into my book of Chidushei Poleg when I eventually get round to writing it. Chidushei Poleg will contain this lovely idea that Aaron's death is inserted here to show us that life goes on despite the fact that the leaders are gathered into their people. Okay.
Johnny, that's in part what I meant. But also it was because there really had been a little discontent that this whole family was ruling everything, and that it seemed rather dynastic, and that this was really matter of continuing a line of, in some ways, civil servants and not kings. These were not Moshe, they were not Miriam. These were, they had a position to fulfill, they had property rights and lack of property rights as a result, and that this was to endure, but it was not to enshrine the family, it was to have a succession in the position.
Okay, I think that works as well. The idea being that Aaron's death is a turning point, and it is an important and significant event, as Julia said, and I think that fits very nicely. Okay, great. Let's go back to the Gemarah.
What was your idea, Johnny?
Well, it was a sort of a watered down version of that, really. I thought that it was a significant event. Aaron HaKohen here is the figurehead of the kahuna, of the priesthood, and the fact that he died and yet they carried on journeying meant that the priesthood itself was in good hands and continued to go through Aaron's lineage. But I think that Sharon's extra bit, that this was something which was demonstratively sort of the show must go on, I think adds to that idea. Barry, I think you wanted to say something. You'll have to unmute yourself.
Yes. To me, what stands out is that at age 123, climbing mountains to die and journeying all this much, it's inconsistent. I mean, it's one thing to say someone lived to be 123. It's another to say he did all that climbing. Okay,
so we have over the years in our shiurim, we have come across issues with numbers on many occasions, and numbers in Tanakh are not necessarily to be taken literally. Some people do take them literally, but they're not necessarily to be taken literally. Now, whether he was really 123, whether he was 123 in real years, I'm not so sure. Or the standard answer that is given in various kindergartens and beyond is that years were different, body was different, nishtaneh hateva, the nature has changed and people could do things that, I mean, Noach lived how many years? Lived 900 years, Methuselah 960 years. You know, all these numbers, we get ourselves in a right pickle if we take them literally. We were learning in our Tanakh Shia on Sunday about the Philistines, who had apparently 30,000 chariots. And we worked that out. It just can't be. There's no army in the entire world today even that has 30,000 tanks. The numbers just don't fit at all for the population of the area, and therefore we don't take those figures literally. They mean a lot. Now, whether you can say that about the years of man as well, you can see in the early part of Sefer Bereshit, people living hundreds of years. Avraham Avinu lived till 175, Aaron 123, Moshe 120, etc., etc. So if you could understand it, if it was a one-off, if everybody died at 60 or 70 and somebody died at 120, you could say, wow. But everybody's dying at what we would say were ridiculous ages. And so I think that you have to, if you like, take it with a pinch of salt, and it's not necessarily to be taken literally. Okay, let's go back to the Gemarah. Let's go back to the Gemarah. There we go. That should be on your screen now. Right. So that was the month that Aaron died. That was Av. Now there we go. We've got a question, haven't we? There's our question against the Gemarah. The Gemarah said, we don't announce the intercalation of the year ever before Rosh Hashanah. Well, Av is before Rosh Hashanah. And that is the question that the Gemarah started with. Inni, is that intercalate before Rosh Hashanah? What about this story? You told me that in emergency situations, let's just go back. Mipnei adchak, in an emergency situation, ma'abrinota achar Rosh Hashanah miyad. We allow the intercalation immediately after Rosh Hashanah, but never before, even in an emergency situation. And now our decoded message shows that's not true. It's not true. They intercalated in the month which Aaron died, which was the month of Av. So how are you going to get out of that one? Says the Gemarah. Answers the Gemarah. Where are we? Over here. Answers the Gemarah. Chashuvei mechashvi galuyei lo megalu. What they did was they calculated that they're allowed to calculate that they're going to need an intercalation. So already by Av, the previous year, they can see that things are getting a bit early. This year, it was just on the cusp. We just about managed to get Pesach in the spring. So we know, don't we? We can work out, don't take a genius to work out that 11 days earlier next year, it's going to be too tight. Pesach is going to be at the end of the winter and not in the spring. And therefore, we're going to need an intercalated year. So says the Gemarah, they can calculate that they're going to need an intercalation year. Galuyei la megalu, but they're not allowed to reveal. They never actually publicized their decision until after Rosh Hashanah. So the sages in the Sanhedrin will have had their discussion long before Adar. They will have made their decision in this particular case. They made their decision in Av already. And why did they send out the message so early? Because they were worried that the Romans would forbid any intercalation, or they would forbid that there would be any messages to go out, that they would send messengers and they would get caught by the eagle, etc., etc. And so they weren't taking any chances. And this was a shat adchak. They started to send out the messengers, but those messengers would not have revealed. They may have gone to the leaders of the community, but they would not have revealed the fact of intercalation until the very earliest after Rosh Hashanah. That's the answer of the Gemarah, how it gets out of the difficulty. Yes, Sharon.
Is the reason why the Romans would have been a threat to this procedure not only just because they were against Jews traveling and talking to each other and being part of an international conspiracy, perhaps, but also because the Roman calendar was important to them as the Jewish calendar is to us. And that by keeping the Jewish calendar, we were therefore engaging in a resistance. That's a question.
Yeah, there could well be. I mean, I think that the accepted reason why they would have messed around with it or calendar and not wanted us to have a fixed calendar is so that we wouldn't be able to celebrate our festivals properly, because they were obviously would have been aware that the festivals were fixed by the lunar calendar, and they would much in the same way as the Shomronim. Johnny Halpin, we spoke about this in Shul, didn't we, about the Shomronim who wanted to muck up the calendar, and they didn't that they would mess up the fires on the hills so that we wouldn't know when Rosh Chodesh was. Everything in the Jewish religion is dependent on time, if you think about it. Shabbat, festivals, everything. If we don't know when, we don't know the date, and we don't know the day of the week, we can't really do anything. We don't know, when to celebrate Shabbat. We had our famous discussion about the island of Samoa, didn't we? We don't know when Shabbat is there. Whether it in Friday, is it on Thursday, is it on Sunday? Who knows when Shabbat is in Samoa? If we don't know when the calendar, then we can't do our festivals, and that's the accepted reason why we think that the Romans would have messed around with it. But you're right, I suppose, Sharon. They wouldn't have liked the fact that we were different. We're going to read that in the Megillah, aren't we? We're going to read that on Thursday, Wednesday night and Thursday in the Megillah. What does Haman say to the king when he wants the king's permission to destroy the Jews? He says, Yeshna am echad mufuzah or muforad. There is a one people who are spread out all over the place. V'datehem shonot, and their laws are different. They're different, and v'datei ha'am, and they don't keep the people. They don't keep the king's laws. In other words, the reason that Haman gave for wanting to get rid of these people is that we kept different laws, and the fact that we kept a different calendar may well be part of that, may well be seen as subversive. So I think that's part of the same thing, Sharon, and I think it adds to that idea of antagonism, really, of the Romans to Jewish practice, and which includes the Jewish calendar. So I agree with that.
Wouldn't we have known, Johnny, if it was a bit tight Pesach this year, as you just said, that it's going to be, we could add it on now. Not add it on now, we could discuss it now, straight after Pesach.
Yeah, but
didn't have to wait till after to discuss it.
Then we'd be worried. Yeah, they can discuss it whenever they want, but they wouldn't reveal it, because they would be worried that when the people came to Adar, they'd have forgotten already, and then they'll do Pesach in the wrong month.
No, you're saying they discuss it at the beginning of Av.
They could do
amongst themselves. No?
That seems to have been what's happened here. They discussed it amongst themselves, sent out the messengers, but they said, shush, keep it to yourself until later on in the year. That seems to be what's happened on this occasion. Now, we're going to go back in the last few minutes now. Well, we're going to go on in the Gemarah, but the Gemarah is now going to go back and find out, ask a question and give us the answer as to why in our code, the word nitziv, which means a pillar or an officer, why that was the code word used for a month. And it's really interesting. So let's go on. My mashma dahai netziv lishana deyarcha hu. My mashma, what's the meaning? That's a modern Hebrew word we use as well. Mashma'ut means meaning. So my mashma, what's the meaning? Dahai netziv, that this word netziv, which comes from the word stand, somebody who stands upright. Where have we got here that word?
Atem nitzavim hayom.
Atem nitzavim hayom kulchem, nachon. Is that your bar mitzvah sedra, Johnny?
No.
Whose bar mitzvah sedra is it?
Nitzavim bayerach. Somebody in Vine Street.
Yeah, it's mine.
Oh, yours.
Yeah. Yeah. So Atem nitzavim, you are standing here today. Nitzavim has an implication of standing upright. You are standing here before Hashem. So that's why the word for a pillar is either amud, and amud is a pillar, which from the word omeid, to stand, or netziv is a pillar, which is also from netziv, to be stood, stable. Netziv means to be stable. So some
netziv called the netziv because he was a pillar.
No, the netziv is called the netziv because his name is Naphtali Tzvi mi Berlin. Nun Tzadi Bet. But he was, of course, a pillar. He was a pillar of Torah. So I'm sure that was part of it as well. But the netziv was Reb Naphtali Tzvi mi Berlin. That's why he's called the netziv. So the netziv here is a pillar. Who stands upright like a pillar? Ever been to Buckingham Palace? Who stands upright like a pillar outside?
The soldiers. The soldiers.
With a strimal on his head?
The Grenadier Guards.
The sentries.
The Grenadier Guards.
Right, the sentries, the officers. The officers. Yeah, the guy stood completely still there outside the palace, yeah, with his shiny boots and his spodak on his head. He's a netziv, he's a pillar, he stood there like a pillar. So the netziv here is also a word for an officer, for the officer of the law, officer of the army. Let's have a look at the Gemarah. So the Gemarah says, why does this word netziv mean a month? And he tells us, he sends us off to Malachim Aleph, chapter 4. Over here, you can see it in brackets. I'm going to put it on the screen for you. And Leon is going to read it out. I'm sure Leon's had this ready from this morning because he's looked in the notes already. Hang on, here we go. There we are. Right. You should have the screen. Have you got the screen? Yeah. Okay. Chapter 4 of Malachim Aleph, verse 7.
Solomon had 12 commissioners over all of Israel, who sustained the king and his household. Each one sustained him 1 month out of the year. Okay, let's have a look at the Hebrew of that translation. I actually like the Chabad translation better because it's got a word there that none of us would ever use in everyday language. Solomon had 12 officers all over Israel who provided victuals for the king and his household. When was the last time any of you used that word in a conversation? Victuals. Anyway.
Robert Belkin used to translate it as victuals or victuals, I think.
I had to look in the Hebrew to know what the English meant when I saw this. Anyway, look at the Hebrew. Shlomo, and Shlomo had Shneim Asar Nitzavim. He had 12 Nitzavim, 12 pillars, 12 officers. You can see it's the same word. And what did these 12 officers do? Al Kol Yisrael, they were all over Israel. Kilkelu et hamelech vet beito. They were responsible for providing sustenance, providing money in order to keep the royal household. Kilkelu, from the word, the modern Hebrew word for economy is
Kalkala.
Kalkala. Kalkala, it's the same word. So the kilkelu et hamelech, they provided the economy of the melech, of the king, Bet Beito and his household. Chodesh b'shana, yiyeh al ha'echad lekalkel. Each one of these officers had to provide provisions for the royal household for a period of 1 month. So they had to go and collect taxes from their region. So let's say, the north of Israel had to do Nisan, and then the Galil had to do ER, etc., and until all 12 of them had to do 1 month. So you can see now, come to you in a sec, Leon, you can see now from this pasuk why they used the word netziv as code for a month, because a netziv is a pillar is an officer, and Shlomo had 12 officers who each had to provide provisions for a month. Now the Romans aren't going to know that, are they? But Rava would have known that. Rava would have known the code, and that's why the Gemarah used that pasuk for our code. Really fascinating. Yes, Leon.
Just to mention, with respect to you and with respect to Michael Leaf, the word is pronounced in English victuals.
Oh, well, thank you very much. There you are. You see, I don't even know how to pronounce it. Never mind, use it. Victuals. Well, what's a C doing there?
Don't know.
Well, it just shows you. What did you say that Rebbe Balkin used to call it?
Victuals.
So Rebbe Balkin knew that the C was silent. I never knew the C was silent. Okay, well, there you are. I think I can say without fear of contradiction or being wrong that I have never used the word victuals or victuals for that matter in everyday conversation. But if you want to know what it is, look in the Hebrew, and it's.
You must have used the word vitals in your medicine.
Vitals, yes, but not victuals.
Yeah, we need victuals, otherwise.
You're right. If you don't have victuals, your vitals won't be very good. Yeah, you're right. Okay, let's go back to the Gemarah. Hang on, I've lost it. There we go. Found it again.
In the middle of my mishma.
Right, there we go. My mashma, the high netziv lishna deyarchu, dichtiv, because it writes in our pasuk, v'lishlomo shnei masar nitzavim al kol Yisrael, v'kilkelu et hamelech vet anashav chodesh bashana. And our pasuk says Shlomo had 12 officers who provided victuals for the king for a month. V'hachtiv u'netziv echa. So now the Gemarah says, well, that's all very nice. But hang on a minute. There's another verse later on in the same pasuk which contradicts that verse. V'hachativ, has it not been written? Is it not written elsewhere? And that is, I'll show it you on the screen in a minute. It's in the verse 19 of the same chapter. Unetziv echad ba'aretz. There was only one officer over the land, not 12. And the Mefarshim say that this one officer was responsible for providing for the king for the whole year. Let's have a look at the context. Let's go back to our pasuk in chapter 4. And it's verse 19. Let me share the screen again with you. Sorry.
Chantal says there was more than 12 then. Added the one on.
Yeah, that's a second opinion. There's Rashi said two Mefarshim. I'll tell you about them in a sec.
Okay, sorry.
There it is, verse 19, Leon.
Gever, the son of Uri, in the land of Gilead, the land of Sichon, king of the Amorite, and of Og, king of Bashan, and one main commissioner who was over the entire land.
Okay, so there we have Unetziv Echad. So previously we had Shnei Mesrei Nitzavim, and Rava was meant to understand from this Nitziv Echad that he was talking about a month. That was the code. But what if Rava thought, well, maybe they don't mean verse 7, maybe they mean verse 19 in the code? Then he wouldn't get it, would he? Because this is one officer over all the months. Now, that's where Rashi comes in. Rashi gives two explanations to verse 19. One explanation is that this was one guy on top of the 12. In other words, the 12 were indeed responsible for 1 month each, as it says in chapter 7, but they didn't deliver the victuals to the king themselves. They delivered their portion, their monthly portion, to one main officer, which is why Leon translated it as main officer. I think you used that wording, Leon, in your translation.
Yes, it's in parentheses.
Okay, in parentheses. Okay, because it doesn't say it in the Hebrew. So the parenthesis there is going according to the first explanation of Rashi. First explanation of Rashi is that this guy was on top of the 12. So he was a superintendent officer. The 12 officers would give in turn would give their money for the king's household to this officer, and the officer would be responsible, the main officer would be responsible for delivering it. The second explanation of Rashi is rather cute and rather helpful to us. The second explanation of Rashi says that there were 12 officers because each one of them was responsible for a month. What happened in a leap year? Which one of the 12 is going to draw the short straw and have to go and find another month's worth of victuals for the king? So this extra officer, says the second explanation of Rashi, was a 13th officer who came into play in a leap year. Now, if that's the explanation, then it's very clear to Rava, isn't it, that the code is really obvious, that the Netziv in the code is the month of Adar, the extra intercalated month, and it all fits absolutely beautifully according to the second explanation of Rashi. That this verse 19, which apparently at first glance contradicts verse 7 over here to say there were 12. No, says Rashi in his second explanation, this was the 13th one that we needed for Adar Bet. And because of that, that is why they chose Netziv as the code word for the month. And I think that is a good place to stop. And we'll just go back to the Gemarah to finish off that little section, because it just very, very neatly finishes that idea. So Vahachtiv says in the over here in the Gemarah, Netziv Chad, Rav Yehuda and Rav Nachman. They Rav Yehuda and Rav Nachman each had an opinion. It would seem that the Gemara is not sure which one was which. Chad Amar, one of them said, Echad Mumuneh al Kulam, one was appointed over all of them. First explanation. V'chad Amar, and the second one said, Keneged Chodesh Ha'ibur, it is corresponded to the intercalated month. And there we go. That's a nice place to stop, because we've come to our little symbol where we'll start a new little idea next time. Any questions on today's proceedings?
Great, that. Very good. Good ending.
Okay, if no questions, let's stop recording, please, Avril.